Very much for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to dive straight in today, and today's what we're looking at is how to get more out of your investigations, how to achieve a deeper level of risk reduction in your investigations that you normally get. Now, to do that, the first thing we need to do really understand is where we are right now. And most of the investigations I see, there's this focus still on human error, right? And it's driven by some of the models in use, and it's just what it is. And, we see things like this, and I'm sure these are common experiences for you all. The worker made an error or violation. The worker failed to follow procedure. The worker was complacent. There was complacency. They didn't identify the risk. The supervision wasn't adequate. They weren't there, right over someone's shoulder. These are common issues that we see, or root causes that we see brought up a lot of the time. And at the end of the day, we've got to ask ourselves, have we learned anything yet? Have we learned anything yet? Because typically, when we get these as our root causes from our investigations, or what we highlight as our issues, these are the solutions we put in place. We discipline the worker. They're written up, right? They're retrained. We'll get a new toolbox and we'll roll it out to everyone. We'll put the new information in the induction. We'll change a line in a procedure. We'll do these really superficial changes to our system or to the people, and we attempt to change the behaviour of our people. At the end of the day, we've got to ask ourselves and be honest, hold the mirror up. Have we actually improved anything? Have we actually made a difference to our workplace, or are we just taking the easy way? Right? And I get it, resources are tight, time is tight, but the problem we find, and this is from Todd Conklin, right, is that after an event, we oversimplify the event. We just take this easy way out, and blame is easy, right? Now, many of you are sitting there probably right now looking at me and cursing the screen or something and saying, well, we don't blame. We don't blame. We look for organisational issues. And that's fine, you probably do, but how deep are those organisational issues? How much past human error are you moving into organisational error? And the reason we actually stick in these places, these light places, these places without depth, is because it's easy, right? And we're looking for where we don't like things we don't understand. We're uncomfortable. It creates discomfort and understand things. So we attribute an easy explanation, right? And that general, as Nitsky said, those first ideas which can explain the unknown as a truth, so good, it's then held to be true. We don't dig deeper, right? Because, we've got our solution. The worker wasn't trained, train the worker. Or the worker was complacent, let's have a conversation with the worker. The worker rushed, we put out to the workforce, we tell everyone, don't rush. There's no production pressure. However, we know that's not true because we need production pressure, right? So we've got to go through that. Now, typically what we see in a lot of events is how we treat people. And when we see people involved in an event, they are typically asked about their own actions, and that's where we focus our investigation. This is the problem, right? Because if we view the driver as the problem, then that's what our questions are going to be about. Our questions are going to be about, did the driver follow or not follow the procedure? Was the driver licensed? Did the driver get complacent? Did the driver speed? Was the driver trained? Were they experienced in those conditions? And all those questions are purely about the driver, right? If we only ever ask questions about the driver, just our solutions will all be about the driver. And that's all we're going to have. And unfortunately, if that's all we do is have solutions about the driver, then we're still got risk for the rest of everyone. And I'll demonstrate, there's a story I tell, and a few of you who've tuned in today, I've heard this story a few times. But I like it because it's simple. It gives a really clear description of what happened. So I was working with a mining company a few years ago, and this vehicle was, this was before I got there. It was about a year before I came in to give these guys a hand on critical risk. And a driver of a light vehicle, when I say light vehicle, it's just a ute, standard Toyota workmate ute, was driving out of the mine site, parked the car to go and get out of the car and go get a tag, their identification tag off a tag board. They jumped out of the car, ran around, grabbed the tag, turned around. Oh, vehicle's not there, right? It's rolled down the hill. And because, you know, when they pulled up, they hadn't put the handbrake on, they hadn't put it in gear, they hadn't put it in the wall, all these sorts of things, right? So they did an IQ investigation, and basically this is what they, you know, this was the root cause. And I'm sure sounds common. The worker failed to follow the procedure. I'm sure heaps of you have seen that. And that drove their solutions, because the questions were about the worker, you know, failed to follow procedure. Now, you know, guess, and like, you know, there's no prizes for this guessing, for winning this one, is guess what the solutions were. Guess what the actions were. Worker received a written warning and they were retrained in operating a light vehicle. All right. That was it. Those sound familiar? I've seen it countless times. And look, to be quite honest, a number of years ago, that's where I was at. That's where I was at. I thought that was doing a good job. And now I know it's not. And most of you, I assume, know it's not too. So, now 12 months later, almost to the day, the exact incident occurs again. The exact time of day, the exact type of vehicle, at the exact location, at this exact same mine, right? Got out, stopped the vehicle, ran around to go take their tag off the tag board, turned around, car's not there, it's rolled down the hill. And this time it's just hit a wall. And the general manager of the mine asked me to investigate. And we made a conscious decision that we're going to apply and change our thinking from who failed to what failed. We were going to look at the organisation's skin in this game, because obviously our previous investigations don't prevent reoccurrence. And by the way, that's one of the unicorns in the safety world, that investigations will prevent reoccurrence, because they don't, right? And just look at the amount of recurrences you have. We decided to look at what's our skin in the game as an organisation. Where have we contributed to and enabled the error? Now, we know the driver didn't put the handbrake on and didn't put it in gear, right? That's an error. Haven't learned anything yet. And that's a counterfactual. If they had put the handbrake on, if they had put it in gear, yes, of course it wouldn't have rolled down the hill. But we haven't learned anything. So what can we learn? And this is what we learned. We learned that there was resource constraints. We learned there was normalized deviation. You know, I went and spent several days driving around with various people, just talking to them about everything, and not just the event, about work. And we found that a lot of the time, people didn't park properly. There was real production pressure. You know, we learned that, for example, that this mine, like very close proximity to a town, and if you didn't get out on time, if you didn't actually leave the underground workers on time so they could set off the explosives on time, they couldn't fire. They couldn't fire the explosives. Because if they did fire the explosives, like when they fire the explosives, if they did fire the explosives on time, out of time, sorry, then they'd get 1,000 phone calls to the EPA, and the EPA would fine them. So they had a choice. They either fired outside, got a fine, which eventually would, you know, affect their license to operate, or they didn't fire the explosives and they couldn't, and it really constrained production for the next day. That's production pressure. There were change management issues and risk assessment issues. They put this process in, this underground tag board, with absolute no risk assessment, no change management. There were 30 vehicles going out at the end of the day and coming back in at the start of the day that were required to stop at this location. They had space for car parking for 2. what's this, what did they think was going to happen? Where was the surprise, right? The obvious answer was there was not enough parking. We found that, which wasn't found in the original investigation. There were trade-offs, right? The management team just didn't have the resources it needed, so it was trading off doing certain tasks in prioritisation. The supervisors were spending 80 to 90% of their time doing paperwork on the surface instead of being with their people. They were working on safety work, not the safety of work. All these issues we found, right? And David's correct. It was all previously, it was fix the worker. But look at what we found. This was asking the right people the right question, observing normal work, right? And look at these systemic issues we're finding, right? There were systemic issues we're finding here. Change management, it's a system issue, right? Risk assessment, system issue. Supervision, system issue. These are system issues that we need to explore with greater depth. And that's what we found. And correspondingly, our corrective actions, our recommendations were based around these issues, these system risks that we found. We've got to change our bias. So rather than our question driver, let's make our questions about the organisation's role in the event, because that then will drive our solutions to organisational solutions. And those organisational solutions, provided we're deep enough, that's where we'll reduce systemic risk, right? That's where we'll hit it. And mention Todd again. Sorry, I love Todd, and he's got some great stuff. He's written a few books worth having a look at. A fatality or a serious event is an organisational failure. It's not human error, right? We've spent the last 20 years trying to fix the worker. It's not working for us, right? We need to change the focus. We need to change the focus on our organisation, on our system, right? And there's a number of areas we can look for this, like systems thinking for safety, the 10 principles by Stephen Schrock. There's some really good stuff in here. It talks about, Schrock talks about how the system's interrelated, how outcomes of the system come out of the whole system and how it's interlinked. Nothing happens in isolation. It all emerges, and success and failure emerges out of the same system, right? And then what Schrock's talking about is some of these system things. And this is what we need to get our investigators to truly look at when they're looking at their investigations, right? What's the field level involvement like in the empowerment like, right? Where's the local rationality, okay? Where have we got demand and pressure? Where's there's resource constraints? COVID has affected greatly industry in the last 2 years and how we do things. How many investigations are pulling up that COVID has affected resources, be it people, be it equipment, those sorts of things. The trade-offs that we have to do, right? All these things, and even just the normal variability of work. We know that these things all contribute. We look just independently. We have to look at how they relate to each other, right? And so as Schrock talks about, these things, success and failure, emerge from the total system that we have, right? And they're equivalent. Success and failure come out of this. So, this is where we need to start looking in our investigations, right, is our systems. Another area we should start looking is in high reliability organisations, right? And they possess these, and they call themselves a learning organisation, right? And they are learning organisations. They have these 5 common characteristics. Now, there's a whole heap of papers written about these guys and science behind HROs. If you're not into it yet, I really encourage you strongly to have a look at HRO theory and its practicality, because this is where it matters. And they have these 5 common traits, right? They have a preoccupation with failure, this chronic unease. It's basically, what's going wrong when there's nothing going wrong. A reluctance to simplify, which we're going to go into greater depth in the next slide. They're sensitive to operations, the variability of work, right? The deference to expertise, acknowledging that the people that do the work, all right, are not something to be fixed. Yeah, then there's something to be harnessed. There's solution waiting and desperate to be empowered to help fix the issues we have. And this commitment to resilience, right? It's building an error tolerant system, right, that we know can survive failure and thrive after failure, right? These are the principles of a high HRO. How does this help us with investigation? Because if we're a learning organisation, that's what our investigations will do. They'll actually help us learn and improve, right? And if we look particularly in today's terms of today's frame of reference for systemic issues, we look at this reluctance to simplify, right? They're learning the real reasons behind success and failure, not just failure, it's success as well, right? This is what we're trying to achieve, success and failure, right? They avoid discarding information until it's well understood. We don't just look for that simple explanation, right? We want a deep analysis of a wide range of data. So each out, not learning, investigating, but learn about the work. What's everything about the work and the context of the work? That's that data we're talking about. Understand the reasons for success so we can replicate them, right? Understand the reasons. And most importantly, they're wary of blaming human error, right? They don't stop with human error. That's a starting point, if anything, right? That's where they work. Now, we review countless investigations here. And too often we see organisations who say, yeah, we've got an enabling culture. We don't blame that. And that's okay. I get that. You know, we're seeing now less and less of worker being disciplined. But we're still seeing other things. We're and trained. And we're still seeing these are the sort of organisational issues we're seeing, right? We're still seeing the worker wasn't trained. We're also seeing the procedure was wrong or missing. So we put a line in the procedure. We're seeing the risk was not identified or a guard was missing, you know, or the equipment broke down. We're seeing these as our organisational issues. And unfortunately, that's where investigations are stopping, and it's just scratching the surface. What we're after is the systemic organisational issues, right? If these are the processes, the foundation processes in our organisations which aren't working well, right? And they are inherent to the overall system. You would go back to Shirok's principle of emergence, the system being interrelated. They're not isolated factors, right? These are the foundation things, and you know these foundation things in your business. You know these things that aren't working. We talk to a lot of organisations about risk management, risk assessments, and you know, I bet that you know you're not happy with the risk management processes. Well, you're unhappy. Well, majority of you, and it's a generalisation, I know there'll be pockets of brilliance. That, for example, we're not happy with how our risk assessments are done. We know at a lot of levels they're tick and flick, yet we don't get past that, right? And that's the systemic issues we need to start seeing being discovered in our risk assessments. I'll give you some examples here. So if we look at this, a worker not trained or no VOC for forklifts, we know they're organisational issues, right? And they're easy to fix. So that's, you know, we'll just train the workers. We'll implement a VOC for forklifts. Organisational solution, organisational issue. Pretty simple, right? These sound familiar to you guys with your own investigations? There's no depth, right? And we know that. Why weren't the workers trained? Why is there no VOC process for forklifts? Workers weren't trained because maybe there was no training needs analysis. Maybe there wasn't enough trainers involved. Maybe it gets down to the resourcing of the training department. Maybe it's not resourced at all. Maybe we don't do these things. No VOC for forklifts. Well, maybe we didn't consider VOC as being a credible part of our training management system. Why didn't we see that? Maybe it's lack of experience. Maybe it's lack of information. Maybe it's a lack of resourcing again. We need to get below that tip of the iceberg. You know, it wasn't the top of the iceberg that starts getting Titanic. It was below. I hope that's correct anyway. Right. So if we were really, truly to dig, and I'm assuming that heaps of you have conducted investigations or managed investigations or reviewed investigations where training is an issue, right? How it frequently comes up. And to be honest, it's a hard thing to fix. That's a substantial herd of elephants to get your head around in any organisation is how do we deliver on this, you know? And we might find a systemic issue like this, the training system not providing us trained competent workers, right? Now we know that if we have trained competent workers, it improves our capacity to work more safely. That's great English there. To work safely. It improves that capacity, right? We know that's the truth, right? If we've got trained competent workers, does our training system deliver that? If not, then it doesn't provide that, right? And it's just a counterfactual, pretty much. Implement a training system, provide trained competent workers is a solution. Right? And these are the sort of things we're looking at. Like, so example, and you know, burn me at the stake, heretic, if you like, the Take 5 process, that the pre-task risk assessment that we get a lot of people to use. And we're calling a variety of it, you know, there's Take 5s, slams, you know, all these, you know, other things that we call them. Are they meeting their objective? Is the management system meeting its objective, right? Is our risk management, is our change management meeting its objective? Is it managing change? If it's not, well, then maybe it's not managing change across a wide variety of risks in our business that we're bringing in, right? Are we purchasing fit for purpose equipment? If not, that could affect more than the one issue, right? Are we resourcing things correctly? This is where we need to dig. We need to get into these foundation systems. It could be human resources. It could be, you know, as I said, budgeting process. It could be an investigation process. All these things, these foundation systems are where we need to look. Right. And reduce systemic risk, we need to identify it. Now, to identify systemic risk, we've got to get into the context of normal work. So this is from one of Todd's books, Pre-Accident Investigation. Highly encourage people, if you haven't read this, to read this. And Todd talks about the context being the most important part we can learn. And he's not talking about the context of the event. What he's talking about is the context of the work, right? The context of how the work is completed every day, because that's where we'll find our systemic issues. So Todd also talks about the black line and the blue line. So the black line is how we imagine work to be done, or we intend work to be done. But that's our policies and procedures and those sorts of things. This is where how work is normally done every day. Every day. We know, you know, I talk to heaps of people and heaps of organisations, and typically I get a response of anywhere between 50 to 70% that our procedures are complete and correct. So what are they doing the rest of the time? They're adapting, they're innovating, they're getting the job done. If you tell them to dig a hole and you give them a backhoe, they'll use the backhoe. If you tell them to dig a hole and all they've got is a shovel, they'll use a shovel. That's how workers work. We come to work to get the job done, get paid, go home, right? And no one intentionally comes to work to get hurt. So what drives how they choose to do a job? Well, personally, I think there's a lot of work to be done in this space about choice in this occasion, in this instance, but I think it's more about reaction and response. And they're responding to all of these type issues. And they occur whether or not we have an event or not. These exist all the time. You know, we talk about design shortcomings. Maybe there's issues with the with the plant, the fixed plant itself, or the mobile plant. The variability of work, people come and go. Like, you know, a lot of organisations now experience labour shortage, particularly unskilled labour shortage. Right, that's affecting how we go, and we're also experiencing skilled labour shortage, right? Which is amazing considering where we are in the world right now. We've got flawed processes, right? There's resource constraints. I don't work with any organisation that believes they're overstaffed. Every organisation I work with believes they've got more work than they can possibly do, right? We talk about goal conflicts, and there's age-old ones like, you know, operations and maintenance, production and safety, you know, contractor-client goal conflicts. All these things drive how work occurs, right? The conditions of work. And this is the thing, this is the places where we need our investigations to start pointing. We need to start tracking on these things and moving away from the typical stuff we dig into. Asking the questions, when do you have to adapt? What's out of your control? These are the questions we should be asking our investigation to learn the systemic issues, because this is about the work, about the event, and that's what we want to do. And look, just as an aside, ask yourself this, right? Just ask yourself this question, a bit of homework. Where do you see your procedures? Are they, you know, in terms of like, are they 100% complete and correct, 90, 80, 70? Ask yourself that. And acknowledge that if we acknowledge that they're not always complete or correct, and they probably couldn't be, to be quite honest, you know, imagine how big they'd be. Why do we only react or respond when something goes wrong? Why do we not react when work goes well, or respond when work goes well, and reward our workers for adapting and having success? Typically, we don't. Our response is to ignore it, right? Because our standard position in management safety is you must always follow our procedures, even if they're not correct or complete, which is a little bit, you know, I don't know, a concern. Again, we're shifting our thinking from who failed to what failed. Eric talks about it. Eric Holnell talks about it in his book, Safety 1 and 2. Please refer to it as Safety 1 and Safety 2, not just Safety 2, because it's not just Safety 2. Eric talks about, let's focus on what goes well, understand why work goes well, ensure that work goes well, not just when it goes wrong. But we still need to get what goes wrong. Eric has never said ignore when things don't go well. He's saying let's learn about everything, right? So, and that's what we're talking about in the previous slide. What's going wrong when there's nothing going wrong? That's the same when we're talking about high resilience, high reliability organizations. You know, that chronic unease, right? That focus on learning about what's going on here in the middle. And that's where we'll start to see our systemic issues. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. Now, don't kill me, I've used 5 whys as a simple example. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think 5 whys is a pretty valid sort of simple model for low-level investigations. I don't recommend it for high-level investigations because I don't think it gives enough depth, but we can still sort of get there and demonstrate this. So typically, we might see, and I've just used the as a demonstration from the story about the vehicle not parked, you know, vehicle not parked correctly, right? Typically, we'd actually see that as worker did not park the vehicle correctly, right? But, you know, we're trying to change the language. Worker failed to follow the procedure, you know, rushing or complacency. You know, we'd see those sorts of things. Those are the sorts of things that would come out of a typical investigation, right? So we'd retrain the worker or something like that. It might be that there wasn't might also be that there was a line in the procedure. It could be something like that. And then we just put in a procedure. And then we focus on the human error. Instead, and we do this with people when we're training them on this sort of stuff, let's take, yes, we've got the error, but you're not allowed now to talk about the human. Only can talk about, you're not allowed to mention the human at all. No human factors. All we want you to talk about is organisational issues. And we start to dig into areas like this, you know, insufficient parking provided. The risk assessment is not completed as part of change management. Change management not completed as part of normal operations. Not set as a management expectation or priority. Management team not sufficiently resourced, right? We're focused on systemic organisational issues. Now, if we really dig deep into these things, right, we see these are things that could actually affect how other things are done. For instance, yeah, we could have easily stopped here at question 1 and gone, yep, they don't have enough parking, put some more parking in. Yep, we could do that. But hang on, why aren't we completing risk assessments of change management? What other areas are we exposed to in our business? Where could change management have really leaders exposed if we're not doing it properly, right? And I see this change management issue, so many organisations, and it astounds me because we should have learnt this with Piper Alpha, right? I mean, this is a foundation of modern, of what we consider part of modern safety is Piper Alpha, and the lessons learned from there was change management, right? So that's a systemic issue. Are you picking that up, right? It's not completed as part of normal operations. Well, these are system issues we can fix, right? Not seen as a management expectation or priority. We can change that, right? And if the management team's not sufficiently resourced, we can change that. Right? Alternatively, we can also turn around and say, the CEO or owner of the business can turn around and go, that's okay. We understand that. That's our risk. We're going to tolerate that risk. But at least we've given them the information to make the decision and manage what they know, not manage what they don't know. Try to, not managing what they don't know, if that makes sense. So we've found these risks, we've found these systemic issues, we've got down to the deep stuff, right? And we've got to get the right actions. So we go back to the start of this presentation today, and what we talked about was those really simple things, right? What we're trying to do with our actions, and this is what investigators need to challenge themselves for, is creating the distance between the risk and normal work. Not between work as intended, not between work as imagined, but between the risk and normal work, how it's done when it's affected by all of those things that we have involved in normal work, those issues, those constraints, trade-offs that we discussed earlier, right? And we need to get at the higher end of the hierarchy, right? We need to get higher into the hierarchy. If you went back and looked at your hierarchy of controls that you've applied with your previous investigations, how many are admin actions? What if you removed all of those? What's left? What's left in that place, right? We need to get into this space, right? Address these issues. I look at, sometimes maintenance of equipment. I don't see enough issue or question being asked about, did we select the right preventative maintenance strategy? 4, combine these things as Shirok talked about, right? Local rationalisation. There is no way a vehicle operating in an underground mine, like a standard vehicle, should follow OEM manufacturer recommendations for maintenance, right? Because it's not true, right? It's not reflective of the damage and the work that the vehicle does, right? We should be looking at interlocks, automation, those hard things. And look, they cost money. That's why your investigation reports not just need to be this, yeah, we identify the root cause, we're going to fix it. They need to be about building a business case for change. If we've nearly killed someone, right, and I'm talking killed someone, we really should be presenting to our management team, right, a business case for change. And that's where we need to start. Build the business case for change, identify the systemic risk, and get into these hard actions that'll actually do some damage, right? That'll actually help reduce our risk. Okay. Now, I've stolen this slide from one of my other presentations on critical risk management that we did there with Mosh. And too often I see like these controls that come out of or actions, which are just controls, right? Actions are just controls to manage the risk we found, right? Are just so poorly designed, right? They're a motherhood statement, right? If we're talking about critical risk and we're putting actions in around fatalities, they need to be designed properly, right? They need to be about what is actually going to happen at the work front, at the workplace, that actually affects change. It needs to be about the safety of work, not safety work, right? And they need to have objectives and targets. They need to have performance requirements. We need to have the identify reporting systems and monitoring effectiveness. The ICMM, so I think it's the International Council of Mining and Minerals, has some great guidelines on critical controls, the design and management. Please go there if you want to have a look and dig in a bit deeper and see how we can do this better. But let's get specific with our controls and our actions and actually make a difference, right? That's how we start to see systemic risk reduction. Now, as part of investigation, we come up with these systemic issues. That's too big for us to include a systemic, like a real focused action plan for a systemic risk. And I've put this one here, the training example in here. Now, to actually implement a training system, provide trained competent workers isn't something we can do in a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. It's going to take significant planning. It's going to take significant consultation. It's going to take resources. It's going to take change management. So in your investigations, our advice is just put the goal-based recommendation and let the subject matter expert who's accountable for this come up with a specific plan on how to fix it. That's their job, right? But we've identified the risk. We've identified what we need to do as a goal-based recommendation, and therefore we leave it with them, right? And let them do what they've got to do. And then we'll see, and that's that deference to expertise, right? We'll actually see the experts solving the work. And that's about it. And I see, thanks for bearing with me. It's been a quick one today. And I see Renee's put a comment in the group chat there about too much focus has been placed on policies and procedures and what the work is actually done and what they're faced with. Yep. And that's it. We're talking about normal work. So thanks, Renee. So I guess I'll back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I'd like to invite some questions in the Q&A panel if anybody has any. And just while we wait, that brings us actually to the end of webinars this year. So it's been a great year, and I'm thankful for everyone who's participated and especially all the experts who've offered their advice throughout the year. I think people are learning a lot. Just in the chat feedback, if you like, just any topics you'd like to see next year coming up, anything you would like to learn more about or explore, any thoughts. We're looking at having some panel discussions too, if you think you can suggest any topics for those. So Mark, we don't have any questions. We will send that video out later today and podcast. David said, thank you, Mark. Mahesh, very much appreciate your expertise and willingness to share your experience and knowledge. And that's what it's all about. So it's great. Yep.
No, thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone for your time today. Look, our website's up there. I've got my contact details there. Feel free to reach out if you want to have a chat about investigations or risk management. And we're happy to chat anytime. And thanks, Sarah, for hosting the last one. You'll be relieved. Thank you very much for hosting today, and thanks everyone for coming along. I appreciate it. Okay. And thanks, David.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.